Welcome to another episode of the Men in Conversation series, a podcast series in collaboration with the Khaleesi Foundation and Justice Desk Africa. Today I am joined by Danilo Acquisto, who is the co-founder and creator of a digital agency called Special Effects Media South Africa. Special Effects Media?
You did great.
Okay.
Awesome.
Fantastic. He's also spent 8 years on your TV screens in a number of different shows, Hectic 99, Espresso, all of those things, and also hosts a chart show on Good Hope FM. So thank you so much for being here, for your time.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. I think I like asking people this, and because it's a friendship, what is your longest sort of friend that you've had in the male category? So what is your longest male friend?
I think my longest standing male friendship must be my cousin Sven. We grew up together and our families were very close and we built a really good solid friendship through that.
Yeah.
And then when he moved to Cape Town to come and pursue his career in acting, we moved in together and spent a number of years living together through that journey. And I think I'd probably say he's the one male friend who I've been able to be vulnerable with, have good times with, and really just spend time together for the longest. It's been great.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think a good sort of space to start with this, I think, is to really frame it. And in prepping for this podcast, I read a stat. It's an American study, but I think it's worth mentioning. And I think the stat, it might be slightly off, but I think 1 in 5 men do not have a close friend. And that struck me, and I was like, 1 in 5 men. So if there are 5 men in my office, at least one of us has no close friend.
It's me. When you asked me whether I would be interested in talking or spending some time with you on this topic, I thought to myself, this isn't an issue. Like, obviously men have friendships and there's no issue with friendships until you actually really start to reflect on A, your own friendships, and B, the conversations you've perhaps had with others. And it doesn't surprise me, I think, for a number of reasons. I think it doesn't surprise me because vulnerability, I still think, is something a lot of young males and men in our country, but around the world, I think struggle to identify. Yeah. We don't know or spend a lot of time on what it is that we are feeling. I don't recall any times when my parents were trying to help me navigate what it was that I was feeling. Everything was very focused on outputs and careers or, traits, my ADHD, like queerness, all that kind of stuff was the focus. And on what was I feeling was never a question that I really had. You start hearing about like introverted and extroverted, and maybe just people think that they're more introverted and don't need many friends. And I think the question only comes up when you're in your mid to late 20s and you start to realize like, the world is becoming incredibly small.
Yeah.
Who's here for me?
And
so maybe just because people don't think about it until you realize you need it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so profound. I think people don't think about it until you need it. And I think that sort of sums it up for me. And when I was reflecting on my own life in relation to this sort of topic of this episode, I realized that a lot of my friends are sort of, I don't know if transactional is the right word, but it's sort of very like place-based or activity-based, right? So I love football, so I go watch the game with my friends. We have a couple beers. I, play football with other friends. I have work friends, and it's sort of different compartmentalized. And what I realized was, despite the fact that I'm trying to do a lot of these inner work, therapy, and really unpacking my masculinity, I realized that very rarely do I share the deepest parts of myself with other men. And part of it for me is out of safety and fear of what they might say, and even like the bullying of like even as adults of like the little jabs and
Do you do it with girls? Like, do you unpack your feelings with other girls, just not with men?
It's just not with men, which and that was quite interesting to me as well, because I thought of myself as evolved and like I'm this person, but it would be my women friends, my partner, my sister who I would open up with, share with. And I felt this reticence to open up as deeply with men. And I'm curious, do you feel like you echo that? Is it different for you? Is there similarities, differences? What are your sort of thoughts on that?
I probably would echo that. I'd say it's very hard to build solid male friendships. You have to really work hard at opening up that vulnerability and find people who are wanting to do that and realize that they need it. And I think it's now time to push those boundaries. And I say because most of us see therapists or No, and mental health has become such an open conversation. People realize that, talking to people helps. And now that you realize you don't actually need a physical trained therapist all the time, sometimes it's important just to have friendships that you can unpack your things with. And there are just some things that girls cannot process with you. There are some things that girls just are not able to identify with, understand, or be part of the conversation. And so opening up that vulnerability with male friends is a very important part of it. But I genuinely feel a little bit more blessed because I was very much involved in youth ministries and all that stuff, and so I met a lot of men who were close to either their faith or their emotions. It didn't feel like it was emasculine. It felt like a very masculine conversation about what does it mean to be a man in your relationship, how to approach relationships and have those conversations. And so now that I think about it, there are not many of them, but I've made a conscious effort to ensure that I try and build those, because it is important.
And I think you touch on such an important thing there, that issue of being intentional, that intentionality of it, because it's something that doesn't come naturally. It's something that isn't maybe part of the fabric of growing up. It's something you have to be intentional about. And I think we can all sort of strive towards cultivating spaces where men feel like they can share. And I think what gets lost is that often we think we're often alone in these things, right? We're the only person who's irreparably broken and no one can save us, and we're the first one to experience this. But when you have friends, when you share with others, you realize how universal our stories are, how relatable all of our lived experiences are. And I think a challenge that I'm going to try and impose upon myself, and I encourage listeners and watchers to do this as well, is to start small and to really, if, for example, you go out for like myself and I go watch the game with someone, be intentional and say, 5 minutes before the game, I'm just going to check in with each of my friends. How are you, man? How's your wife? How's work? Because often, fears that I have of maybe not showing up as my best self at work, issues in my relationship, issues with my family, having someone ask me about that and having the space safe and cultivated for that is really important, because one can feel ready to share, but it might not be the space because people are drinking and now you share and then there's laughter and then you're like, ish, never again. So I think my advice, and something I'm going to try and do, is to really create a space. In 5 minutes, how are you doing? How are you doing? And then we go watch the game.
I love that so much. I love it so much because I was also reading a bit online about banter. It's something that comes so naturally to me, is this idea of being able to banter. But if you think of banter in a different terminology, it's like a mutual teasing in some way. It's like a mutual dissing of each other in a way that kind of creates camaraderie. And I think I'm starting to learn a little bit more about dopamine and what makes us feel good. And this lack of vulnerability, you only feel after an encounter. You will come together with a group of friends, like for that footy. You'll have a good time. It's this rah-rah energy, go. And then you'll leave feeling a little bit empty and you'll wonder why. And it's because you know that there's this thing that you're really struggling with, or this thing that you wish you said, or this thing that you really want help with that you didn't get out of this interaction, and then you don't feel as connected to that person. And so I think we should all try and figure out, what does intimacy in this friendship look like? What is it that you want to be feeling? Is it to feel safe? Is it to feel connected? Is it to feel understanding? Is it to feel heard? What is it that you want to feel from a good encounter with a male friend in a vulnerable space? And not every encounter needs to be this DMC deep, let's unpack our souls all the time. But you'll need to know what that feeling feels like, and then try, like you said, be intentional about cultivating that. Ask the question, not only just how's it going? Be like, tell me about your work. How do you feel about that thing? Hey, you just went through a breakup. How are you processing? Use words in the description or the question of the other when you're having a conversation that will glean into their emotions. And I don't know how I feel about it yet. I feel like I'm saying this advice out there, still holding on to it, because I also get, not insulted is the wrong word, but I get challenged quite a lot for being a bit too intense. I only like deep, intimate one-on-one conversation. I'm not good in crowd settings. It's all just banter and joke around. I'm good at it, I can do it, but I feel empty afterwards. And so I think you've got to find that balance of being able to ask these really intimate questions about the other individual and to care and want to know about their lives, and bring that energy down to be able to have that conversation. Otherwise, if you're hoping it'll happen organically, it won't. Like you said, it'll become this spiral of fun and ideas, and wherever it goes organically, and then you'll feel a little bit lost in that process. So intentionality is a really good word. I think you nailed it there.
Okay, fantastic. And I think that dovetails nicely into the sort of next part of this conversation, which is really trying to explore some practical ways in which men and the fact that this thing is called Men in Conversation, how men who are in conversation with themselves and trying to really unpack and really, dig deep and become better versions of ourselves, right? And I use that word specifically, better versions of ourselves, because often people come into these conversations and men are like, they want to change me, I'm toxic, I'm this, I'm that. And it's not about that. It's not about changing. It's about growing and becoming the best parts of yourself and the best version of oneself. And I think men who might be coming into this conversation with the intention of that and looking at this issue of friendship, what just sort of, viscerally off the bat, what bits of advice, what sort of practical ways do you think? We spoke now about being intentional, right? Are there sort of any other ways in which we can connect on a deeper level and forge deeper connections with other men?
How much time do you have? Let me start with saying that you might not know that you need friends in your life, or you may want friends in your life. It's only at the time at which you find yourself going to bed at night feeling lonely and you find yourself alone, you're going through something pretty difficult and there's nobody around now. You can't cultivate a friendship at that point, at that time. It's almost too late by then. And I think South Africans have forgotten that we live on this African continent and we believe in the ethos of Ubuntu. We grew up and are raised by communities. We're not raised as individuals. And I do feel like the West has very, very intentionally and intensely infected our way of believing that I am myself, I'm an individual, I'm powerful, I can do anything by myself, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a boss babe, I can do whatever I want, and I do it all on my own terms. And I think life doesn't happen that way. You speak to people on their deathbeds, you speak to people who are really poor. All of these people really do understand the importance of community. My parents are reaching that sort of retirement age and they're having conversations about who's around. When I've got time in my day, who am I going to pick up the phone and call to be like, do you want to get together? Who are those people? And now you're young, you're dynamic, you're doing your thing, you've got everything going for you, you maybe got a career that affirms you, you've got maybe a partner that affirms you, you maybe have got like one or two social circles, like you can play footy and that affirms you. When those things are not there, what is that thing that affirms you? And that's like the reason to want to enter into a friendship in the first place, is to say like we live in community, we belong together in some way. And if you can understand that as the framework, you will start to realize, okay, I need this thing. It's like exercise. You don't know that you need exercise until you damn well clotted arteries and you're lying in that hospital bed and they're trying to resuscitate you, That's when you realize, oh flip, I need a healthier lifestyle. Don't wait for that long. So start now, build some friendships and be intentional about trying to encourage those, and you don't need 50 of them. You can just be one friend. So I think, that's probably the first thing. And the main overarching view that I have now, and I'm sure there are many ideas that we'll come up with in this conversation, but it's just to be this intentional thing. You be the first instantiator of a conversation that's not platonic. And a lot of friendships generally sit at the surface level. They hang up out here because it is safe and it is fun. And I don't think it's being done on purpose. I don't think people are being intentionally mean or ugly about it. It's just somebody's got to require to pull it down. And my cousin and his wife have come up with these like really cool phrases. My dad knows whenever I phone him, he's like, oh son, you're going to ask me how's my soul? And it's such like a deep thing because it's like a bit too intense, but there are other versions. Like they once, we came over for dinner one night and we were chatting, all the banter, and then my cousin said to me, guys, what is the one thing that's on your mind while you're washing dishes?
Wow.
Like what is one thing that consumes you while you're washing the dishes?
What?
At the moment, like what is that one thing in your life right now that consumes you? And it forces the whole yourself to go, what matters to me right now? What are the things that trouble me? What are the things that interest me right now? And it opens up a whole conversation beyond that point. So I think we've actually got to just learn tools of how to have an intimate conversation. That's probably the first one. I don't know if that resonates. Or...
Yes. Oh my gosh, you blew my mind.
Cool. There you go. Thanks, cousins Sven and Francie.
And I'm sure people listening to this and watching this, if I'm just so inspired. And I think, it just comes down to, asking that question, being intentional and holding space for other people. You know what I mean? And really, as you say, pulling that down to the deeper levels of friendship.
And holding that. I think the other thing that I've noticed about having conversations with men is that they will try, or anybody will, it's not only men, it's anybody in conversation about vulnerable things.
Yes.
People do not like talking about vulnerable things because it does feel, you're worried that it could go south, or it won't be safe, or all these things. You've really got to be a solid anchor. I've noticed this with my partner, I've noticed this with many people, and I think it is a pandemic that we do not know how to hold space.
There we go.
We feel awkward or vulnerable or confused or maybe even a bit ADHD and get a bit distracted, that you're not actually a safe space to have this conversation. And so I think you've got to try and be, in your friendship, somebody who can hold difficult conversation.
Yes.
When the friend comes out and says, and I cheated on them, your reaction should be like, what? You did what? Suddenly the space isn't safe anymore. They're not going to go any further than that. It's got to be like, okay, tell me more.
Let's chat about it.
Or let's talk about more. Or like, don't worry, I'll hold that in confidence. And no, there seems to be more here. Like, keep going. It's okay to share. And trying to really encourage and coax it out of an individual. It's almost as though we don't have this internal way of coaching ourselves to say it's okay to say this or go further or say more. And so I think that's why you'll see these trends on TikTok and all those things. The say more. It's like, say more. There's more to this.
There's
like,
more to
help me unpack this. Let me unpack this with you. Holding space, I feel like is a skill that young people or people in general just don't have. Because they don't know how to regulate their own emotions. How on earth am I going to help you regulate yours?
Exactly.
And so holding space is a good way.
That's so beautiful, because I think, especially as men, you grow up with so much judgment, right? You have these, like you forced within this man box of having to be stoic, you strong, you're the breadwinner, you this, you that, light blue, all this stuff. And phrases like suck it up, you know, boys will be boys, man up, or like these like lashes that keep us within this box. It's like constraining us, right? And I think the importance of someone holding space and just being like, I'm here for you. I'm not gonna even maybe say something. I'm gonna nod. I'm gonna, you know, be empathetic, and I just want you to speak. And I think sometimes the first time that ever happens is when someone goes to a therapist. But knowing we in South Africa, not everyone can afford, not everyone's on Discovery that can, you know, go to a psychologist, right? So I'm not saying we all now need to be each other's psychologists, but just hold space, you know? Be there, a non-judgmental space.
It maybe even starts a phase before that of being able to learn how to find out for yourself what it is that you're feeling. Like, you know, everyone talking meditation and meditation and prayer. I think it's obviously because there's a lot that's assaulting us right now. Understanding what is going on in your mind is really hard to do, even with yourself. It's so hard to figure out what you're feeling. It's hard to figure out what's going on, what you want and what you desire. And I often call some of these deep friendships that you have thinking partners. It's people who helps you think about yourself, what you want and what you desire and what you're feeling. And so being able to process things verbally with somebody else allows an outside source that's not as emotionally connected to the outputs to be able to guide you through a conversation around navigating your own mind. So you will leave there having emptied your toy box, sorting it out with somebody else in some way. And even if two of the pieces fit together now, you're like, at least I've solved that piece of the puzzle. And that's intimacy. It doesn't have to be like, okay, let's talk about our feelings. I'm sad today. I'm in love with this person and they don't love me back. It is just a sense of like, I was able to be vulnerable. You were able to hold space for me and we were able to think together, for example. And so it does start with being able to know that there is a lot going on in your life and in your mind and in your heart that you need to try and process through. And just kind of identifying people who can help you do that. And friendship doesn't need to look a particular way. And that's the other thing that I think we need to start realizing is like you were saying, a lot of this whole like man up, suck it up, friendships, people struggle to get to that intimate place, is it doesn't look a particular way. Like I don't discuss my sex life with one friend, but I will with another because that's how that friendship developed out of a sort of interest in that world. And I realized, oh, this is where we're good at talking at this level and that's fine. And friendship doesn't need to look a particular way. So I think it's about trying to identify what you're feeling, process those feelings with other people in some way, and making sure that both of you are able to hold space for each other. It's when they become one-sided or that it's not a safe space to have a conversation that it suddenly goes up to this platonic level. And that gets very exhausting. So I think eventually you have too many of those sort of friends that are, like you said, activity-based or something else, and you're really just wanting something more. One good friend is better than sort of like 5 of those platonic fun friends, which you can call at any time.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was just so profound. And I think is a lovely place to sort of just, end this conversation. And I really thank you for your time. I really appreciate the fact that you shared, you're so open, and I'm guarantee that the listeners and watchers have learned a thing or two and will take with them. And my challenge to all of you is to share this podcast with one other person, because the stuff we spoke about here, blew my mind, and I'm just pretty sure it can help you.
And don't ask for their number. Just say, hey, do you want to be a friend? Here's a podcast that you might like. You want to be my friend? Thank you. Be brave. Be brave.
Be brave. Don't be toxic. So thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll catch you on the next one. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and please share this with one other person. Thank you so much, Danilo, for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.